I immediately was looked at like an alien, and they did not want to help me. It was an all-female staff, and they said to me, carte blanche, we don't help men. We don't provide the same services for men that we do for women. I mean, they said it, 10 different ways, but the message was very clear and they were very brazen about it. They didn't try to hide it, that men are not victims in their eyes of domestic abuse.
Well, there was no shelter for men there. If the shelter was vacant, we could have allowed a man to go in there.
Yeah, but
because if there was a family, there were women and men and children. It wouldn't be appropriate to have a man go in.
Marissa Aya Garcia was one of my two caseworkers. When you go in and you report child abuse, domestic violence, they're the ones who are mandated reporters. They have to tell my chain of command, and they have to call either child welfare services or the police. Marissa Aya Garcia didn't do any of that. In this conversation, this is a conversation I had with her, I believe, January 2019. And I'm asking her about why I was rejected back in April of 2018. And she explains that there was no shelter for men when I came in. It wasn't until after I complained that they had set up a place for men. Again, none of this is on the books. None of that is. Those are all personal biases of these members of FAP. She says if it was vacant, we could have allowed a man to go in. She does say that. I don't believe that. There's a lot of things wrong with that argument. And also, I filed a Freedom of Information Act request, and it was vacant. There was nobody in there. So
you were able to get the occupancy of that facility at that time?
Yes. They said that they've never had a man in that shelter. They used the word never had a man. And that was from somebody who'd been working there since 1996. What's interesting too about that is that they allow pets. Dogs have more rights as domestic abuse survivors than men do.
You didn't happen to get record of how many requests by men were made to access the shelter, right?
That is an awesome question, because they are not required to write down how many requests they get. So in 2019, 40% of domestic abuse was the woman was the offender. If you look at the family advocacy program's numbers from that same year on the same island of Hawaii, it is 1%. 1% of the time, it's a male victim with a female abuser. When they tried to determine if my ex-wife was guilty or not, at no point did they bring up me or my son, or look at the police records, or talk to any of the witnesses of the abuse of my son. Don Ogden said that women cannot be abusers of men. And we have an affidavit signed by a command master chief who was in the room, who said that she was blue in the face defending all women. In my case, where she's supposed to be presenting my case, she just went on and on about women and how they cannot be abusers. If you're a voting member in that room, which are all anonymous, again, there's no transparency in this, and that's the only information you're allowed to get is what Don Ogden told you, then they're going to say, okay, yeah, well, all right, if this is the expert, from FAP, and she says that women can't be abusers of men, then I guess we'll say that she's innocent. So they wrote a letter, said she's innocent. They took that letter, went to a restraining order court, and they used that. Look, the Navy says, she's innocent. And so I was denied my restraining order because they said the Navy exonerated her, which, again, they didn't actually do. It wasn't an actual court. You can kind of see how it starts to snowball, how these biases from people like the phone call we listened to, Marissa Aya Garcia, who's supposed to be my advocate, right? Her name is victim advocate. She's explaining to me why I was turned away, because, it'd be inappropriate to have a man go in the shelter. And I really wish she would, elaborate on that. Like, please tell me what's going to happen. Like, I want to hear it. It's not like men are asking to go spoon in the bed with other victims. It's like a hotel. There's locked doors. They have a common area. They have places you can go, can't go. They have security there. It's ridiculous. And then so now what she was saying was that, well, now we have a process where it doesn't matter what your gender is. She uses the word now, we don't, as if to say they previously didn't when I came in. And to me, that is the smoking gun in my case, in terms of discrimination. There she is saying they turned me away because I was a man. They thought it'd be inappropriate. And since I've come in, they have changed their policy to allow men. But, the point is, when I came in, they discriminated against me.
There's a lot of issues with the entire case, that some happens to be EO and some happens to be, which you and I both know, the straight up way in which the FAB handles business. Right? We're clear on that. Would that be true?
About
the discriminatory manner in which they do what they do.
Oh yeah, it's awful. It's horrible.
Right. So guess what? Agree. I agree with you.
Yeah.
I read the case and I agree with you. 100%.
Dr. Neal was nice enough to step in and say, hey, this is a really big problem. And, one of the reasons I think it's important is because he is a subject matter expert on, you hear him say EO, he's talking about equal opportunity. The people who are making the decisions are not experts. And so, the point of this audio, and that what I want members of Congress to hear, and just really generally the American public, is to see that, look, when a specialist, when a professional, when someone with experience looks at this, they say it's 100% discrimination. He did see the investigation, so he got to hear FAP's side of the argument. And, I have documents that show them saying flat out, no, we do not allow men in the shelter. And that's not official. That's not written down. The investigator says, what policy? Show me where it says you can deny men. And it doesn't exist, from all the way up and down. I mean, I'll tell you their names: Sally Younger, Marissa Aya Garcia, Dawn Ogden, Beverly Corsi, and Jennifer Yannick. The majority of them, maybe all of them, I'm not entirely sure, I haven't done background checks. The majority of them are all married to high-ranking officers. And so when you ask another high-ranking officer at the same base to find these, officer spouses guilty of discrimination, it's not going to happen. You're not going to get a fair case. There's nothing holding them accountable. So why take discrimination seriously? The Petty Officer Jon Stremel Military Anti-Discrimination Act. What it does is allows service members to file claims against the United States or the federal government if there's discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, absence of religion, sex, sexual orientation, national origin, age, disability, marital status, or political affiliation. So basically, it's all of the 1964 civil rights protections, and we're trying to bring that to the military.
Okay, and so if that bill were to pass, can you help me understand how you envisioned that your life could have been different if the law was already the way you would like the law to be? So just take a guess at what you might have been able to accomplish if the law had been the way that it should be.
That's an excellent question. So I filed my discrimination complaint against the employees of the Family Advocacy Program for turning me away 5 times from a domestic violence shelter for being a man. The whole process, the whole discrimination process as it is now, the system that is in place to ensure there's equal opportunity in the military is a 60-day process. I am now on day 973, still awaiting an answer. They can take as long as they want because, again, there's nothing legally that I can do about it. If this bill was enacted when I had my situation, after 60 days and I wasn't getting an answer and nobody was taking me seriously and they weren't acknowledging the discrimination, I could say, you know what, I'm going to invoke, this Military Anti-Discrimination Act. I'm going to hire an attorney and I'm going to file a claim to collect damages so that I can make myself whole again and my son whole again and get back to being able to serve, the military that I still absolutely love. I mean, I couldn't do my daily job because I was doing depositions with investigators. I had to put exhibits, thousands of pages of exhibits together just to prove my case. If I could have had an attorney do it and had it handled outside of the chain of command, I could report for duty on time, do my thing, and on my off time, my attorney would let me know what's going on. I've spent over $100,000 fighting this discrimination, fighting against FAP in and out of courts. I'm losing my job. I'm being forced retired basically because of the PTSD that I've suffered. Again, it's not just my feelings were hurt. Like I couldn't go into this shelter. They denied me access to the shelter. So I was staying on the beach. I was staying in homeless camps. I was squatting in empty apartments. My own commanding officer said that his wife will babysit my son and that we can stay at his apartment. I was sleeping under the desk at my office, which I'm not really allowed to do. The reality is, even though I am a man and it was a case of discrimination against me within the context of domestic abuse, men are the minority. Male victims, male survivors are the minority. This bill, though, it's not a men's rights bill. To be clear, it will cover everybody. And the majority of the claims that I think will come, which to most people's best guess will be less than 50 a year that will actually be successful, will mostly be filed by women and people of color. It's very, very clear that the military is not good at policing itself when it comes to equal opportunity. They do a lot of PR that sounds really nice, but if you ask anyone who's been through the equal opportunity complaint process, it's a very broken system. The Family Advocacy Program acts as the judge, jury, and executioner when it comes to discrimination cases, as well as the chain of command. Commanding officers are often the ones who are in charge. You can't file a discrimination complaint against your commanding officer. You have to file something under the Uniform Code of Military Justice called an Article 138, in which you're essentially giving all of your evidence of discrimination to your commanding officer who discriminated against you. If anyone watching this has an example of filing a 138 in which the commanding officer looked at it and went, yep, I resign, I'm guilty, by all means, please tell me. Because it just doesn't happen.
So you're trying to achieve for military service members the same ability that the rest of us have to file a complaint, maybe to sue our employers based on discrimination against us based on these certain protected factors like sex, gender, race.
Yep, that's exactly right. Every other American over the age of 18 who works anywhere has this right. And I think it's awful that service members don't have that right. I mean, I don't think any other company would work this way. If we were to say Amazon can decide if Amazon discriminated against its employees, nobody would really stand for that. And yet we seem to have this blind spot for the military. There's a lot of kind of fear mongering and false arguments saying that if military members have the right to bring claims against their chain of command or federal employees for discrimination, then the whole military is going to fall apart. There's going to be a lack of discipline, and there's absolutely no evidence to show that. The same arguments were made when people were advocating for African Americans to be able to serve, women have the right to serve, LGBTQ the right to serve. They all said everything's going to fall apart and there's going to be lawsuits and it's going to be chaos. Recently, there in 2019, in September, a huge part of the Ferris Doctrine was overturned by Congress when they allowed service members to sue for medical malpractice. And there's another bill that's currently making its way up. I believe they have the votes to pass in the Senate, the Vanessa Guillen Act, which will allow service members to sue for sexual assault and sexual harassment. And in my opinion, this is the next natural bill to be passed to allow, service members to sue for discrimination, hate crimes, and all of those other protected attributes that make people human. And thinking of military service members as human sometimes makes people feel uncomfortable. A lot of times discrimination, it's not a victimless crime. It's not, feelings being hurt. It ruins careers. It traumatizes people. It leads them to depression, suicide. It's a morale killer.
So it's the Ferris Doctrine as a whole that you would like to see dismantled?
I'm not saying that right now. Part of the Ferris Doctrine, when it was indoctrinated after the Federal Tort Claims Act was passed, is that it specifically says that military service members can't sue during combatant activities, and it also says during the time of war, or during wartime. A lot of times discrimination happens not in combatant situations. Either way you look at it, let's say we're in a operation or a combatant situation. I mean, I've asked this to other people. I'll ask this to you or anyone watching this. What war, what operation, what mission, name one in which it was absolutely necessary for the military to legally be able to discriminate against its own service members in order to accomplish the mission? Name one. One of the fear-mongering arguments that I've heard is, we're going to start putting Braille in our F-18s, or we're going to have wheelchair ramps to our tanks. And it's so, again, it's really silly. It's a fear-mongering, skies falling kind of argument. And a good analogy I use is think of the NFL. Professional football is an equal opportunity employer. Do you see wide receivers wheeling down the field in a wheelchair? Do you see blind quarterbacks? No, they still have to do the job, but those players can still sue the NFL or their franchise if they are discriminated against for all those other things that we had talked about. They're trying to again, scare people into thinking that having the military be held accountable for discriminating against our own, is somehow going to make us weak. And it's just, there's absolutely no evidence of it. There's no reason for us to continue this outdated law that was passed in 1950. Our country has absolutely changed. The other part I wanted to just really quickly mention is it says during the time of war. The United States has not declared war since World War II. So, one could argue that the Ferris Doctrine would not hold up today at all if you were to interpret it that way. It's not in combat, my situation, and it's not during the time of war. We can get into semantics, but I think just stepping back, morally, as a country, is this really where our values are, that we think it's okay for the military to discriminate against our own service members? I think if people really understood how bad the current system is, I think it would be like a national scandal. But I just don't think that a lot of people know about it because of that military civilian divide. And those who are in the military who have reached out to me since we started championing this bill, they've shared honestly heartbreaking stories.
Jon, there's a legal advocacy group, I think a national group that typically advocates for minorities, who is working with you on some effort. I think it's related to this bill. Can you explain that and why it's unusual, what's going on there? Yeah.
Are you talking about the Minority Veterans of America?
Yes, Minority Veterans of America. Okay.
Right. Yeah. The founder, Lindsay Church from Washington State, started it about 4 years ago, and they sought out to basically represent the needs of underrepresented veterans. And when I went to them saying, I have this bill that I'm interested in passing. They were really excited about it. I've had a really great relationship with that organization. It's not only them. I've also got the Whistleblowers of America who've endorsed it. There are people from Protect Our Defenders, a really great organization that helps military members who are coming forward saying, this is a long past due bill. And it's been really great. We've had a lot of good conversations with members of Congress. We haven't quite gotten to that point where we've gotten a sponsor yet, although I think it's coming down the pike. So if you or any of your listeners, believe in this, they can go to Military Anti-Discrimination Act.com. It's a bit of a mouthful. There's a change.org petition they can sign, but honestly, the best thing to do would be to call your congressman or woman and your senator or senators in your state and ask them to please support this bill. Your senator, Patty Murray, gave Minority Veterans of America a great shout out, and she specifically said that she commends Minority Veterans of America's work on tackling discrimination in the military. And so I believe that, she would be somebody who I think would support it, as well as Senator Cantwell. Congress just needs to do a timeout. Let's look at this, look at where the country is culturally, socially, and is it necessary for us to be able to legally discriminate against our service members? I think most people would say, no, it's not necessary. Let's give service members that warm and fuzzy peace of mind that they can serve openly and freely as themselves without fear of reprisal or retaliation for being who they are, for the religion that they have, for the political affiliations that they have, for their background, their gender, their sexual orientation, and be able to serve, which, we're asking service members to essentially, hey, will you die for us? I don't think most people who pay taxes want to know that, like, yeah, we can go ahead and treat them like crap for who they are, and there's nothing they can do about it. It is still a Sisyphean effort to file a successful discrimination lawsuit. Like, I want that to be really clear. Hey, you're not going to be promoted because you're a Trump supporter, or you're not going to be promoted because you have this religion or whatever it is, or because you're a woman. They still have to hire their own attorney. It still comes out of their own pocket. And then the burden of proof is really high on that plaintiff to show that a federal employee in their official capacity discriminated and hurt them, and they have to show the damages, and they have to prove, that this happened, and it's super difficult to do. And the other really big point is that I want to be clear about is it'll actually improve readiness, because right now commanding officers act as the judge, jury, and executioner, and a lot of these men and women who fulfill these roles, they're trying to train a fleet or a unit, or they're trying to build a base, or they're trying to maintain control over a certain geographical location, and they just don't have the time, resources, experience, or training to be civil rights experts as well, on top of everything else that their demanding job asks of them. This bill will allow commanding officers to command.